Hey, I'm Ben, and this is the full build video for my 13th gourd banjo. It'll be the entire start to finish, and then in the end, I find a potentially fatal flaw in the end product. So, to start, here's the gourd I'm using. It's a bottle gourd that I got from Wellburn Gourd Farm in Southern California in the Santa Ana Mountains. I'm cutting this gourd open with one of those Japanese saws. I've kind of landed on that as my method. I kind of draw a rough line, and it's not very precise, but at this stage you don't really need to be that precise. Yeah, I'm cutting off the top and the bottom so it has that double head that you usually see on these bottle gourd banjos. Now I'm going right to cutting out the neck blank, and this wood is some nice curly maple that I got from one of my grandpa's Amish friends back in New York. I brought it out here with me. He had a ton of it at his shop, and he said he was just lining drawers with it. He had so much of it, and he sold me about 4 necks worth for something crazy, like I think like $18. Now I'm drawing the headstock. That's a French curve I'm using. Those are really useful. And I don't like to work from plans. I just kind of sketch stuff on roughly, and then I make the line a little more pronounced with that French curve, and then I just kind of go for it. And this headstock in particular, it's a design I've done before, and it wound up being pretty asymmetrical and kind of crooked looking. I had it drawn on there, and it looked crooked, it looked wonky, and I just said, so what? And I just did it. I just went for it. It was kind of like a gut feeling, like I think this will be cool if I just leave it kind of wonky. And I think I like it. I like going for sort of more organic, less maybe symmetrical shapes for gourd banjos, because gourds themselves they're all different and they're all asymmetrical. And yeah, it just got me thinking that maybe the next time I make a bottle gourd banjo, I'll actually make the headstock really closely resemble the shape of the actual bottle gourd. It wouldn't work on any other kind of gourd because it would just be a circle, but on these bottle gourds, I think it would be cool. So I'm probably going to do that for the next bottle gourd I get. This is a piece of Paduke that I'm lining up for the fingerboard here, and I just line it up, trace it, cut it out. I really like the Paduke and maple contrast. I think the white and the red go really cool together. Then I just trace and cut out the headstock overlay, which is from the same piece of Paduke. And now it's time to do the glue up. And for that I just smear a ton of glue all over both pieces of wood and clamp it up with every clamp that I've got. And while that was setting up, I went and worked on the back panel for the gourd. A lot of people do a panel of wood on the back, or they'll do another skin on the back, and that just helps it sit more comfortably while you're playing it, and it also helps the acoustics a little. It gives it more of a even surface for the sound to bounce off of. So for this one I just went with another couple pieces of curly maple. I put them together. I tried to kind of make it look a little nice, and then cut that out to the shape of the hole that I cut in the back. Glued that on, and I don't have the clamping thing that I used, but I just put the gourd on a board of wood and put a couple clamps around it. Then the next day when the glue's all set, I took the clamps off, and then I'm ready to do the shaping of the neck and the peg head. And that's a pretty long process. I didn't film too much of it, but here's me just working at it a little bit with the rasp, and then I go to the file and pretty much just feel it out and get the shape I want. I'll periodically like hold it in my hand and see how it feels, and I sort of just go by that as well as the look. Making the tuning pegs has kind of become one of my favorite parts, and for that I picture it as if I've got like all 5 pegs stacked vertically, and I just cut them all out. You can see how I'm doing it here. I cut out kind of the rough shape, and then I just take slices off of that shape. And then I take each slice, I kind of whittle it down with with the knife. I just whittle it into sort of a rough cylindrical shape. And then that tool I've got there, it's a peg shaper, and it's made for violin pegs. So I just kind of shape it with the knife enough so that it fits, and then that's basically a pencil sharpener with a slight, I think it's like a 3-degree taper on it. and then that's going to match the hole that my peg reamer makes in the headstock. So there it is. You can see kind of how smooth that looks. And then I use the belt sander on the peg to try to remove as much material as I can, and I kind of hold it along the edge there to sort of create a little divot for my fingers, for your fingers while you turn the peg. And then from there I kind of sand and file and carve it and just get it kind of rounded out, get it so it looks good and it feels comfortable in your hand. And my pegs never come out perfect, but I like the sort of imperfections in them, and I'm not much of a whittler. I don't carve very much. That's something I'm trying to get better at. So as time goes by, I might do fancier pegs, but for now I really like how these come out. And I kind of douse them in some teak oil, and that's it. That's the finished peg, all ready to go. So now I'm doing the side dot inlays for the fret markers. I used to do it at every fret, but lately I've just been doing the 3rd, 5th, 7th, 10th, and 12th, which is really all the reference that you need. If I'm doing it in the side of the fingerboard wood, I like to use the neck wood, and vice versa. That's kind of been my style since the beginning. But you can see what happened here, because I'm using the light colored maple when I cut these plugs. The friction from the plug cutter completely charred the outsides of the plugs, and then once they're all sanded flush here, they look terrible. They look like it reminds me of that Chinese century egg dish. It just looks kind of nasty. So I took all these plugs out very carefully, not to damage anything, and then I am re-drilling some new plugs out of this piece of maple, and you can see I'm keeping it really cool. I'm trying not to see any smoke. Anytime I see any smoke, I just get it wet again. And that plug cutter I'm using it's just like a leather stamp that I filed some teeth into. So I really need to get like a real plug cutter, but this has been working for me so far. And then there's the unburned plug, pounding it in. And there it is, and that's what it looks like next to the old ones. And then there's the whole neck with the actually not burnt plugs in there. It looks much better. Now I'm doing what for me is the most stressful step of the entire process, which is fitting the neck to the gourd. And the reason it's so stressful is because the way I do it, you really just get one shot, and if you blow it, you kind of blow it. So the way that all my necks mount on the gourd is there's no fasteners, there's nothing. It's just I use a tapered dowel stick, and then I slowly file away at the holes and at the neck holes in the gourd until the neck just sits at exactly the right depth, and then the string tension holds it all together. So if I go too far, if I go too deep, I can't really go back. So it's kind of stressful, and just to get the whole alignment right is tough. But basically, you can see what I'm doing here. It's just like file, see how it fits, file a little, see how it fits, and you just go bit by bit until it's done. And then when I think I've gotten it to where I want it, you see I'm checking the scale length. So I've got my side dots measured for a 22.25-inch scale length. So now I'm looking at the measurement, and the bridge position is where I want it. So I'm done. Once I had the neck slots cut, the gourd was looking really thin, and it looked like it needed some reinforcement. So I just around the holes put some fiberglass and epoxy in. I used to fiberglass the whole entire inside of the gourds, and I stopped doing that because it felt kind of synthetic, and it affected the tone in a way that I couldn't really decide if I liked or not, and I just wanted the more natural approach. But going forward after this experience, I think I'll be fiberglassing fully any gourds that are thin like this one. Then I start drilling the holes for the pegs, starting small and working my way up, and then once it's big enough, I get the peg hole reamer in there, and that matches the taper of the peg shaper, so then the peg just sits perfectly in there. It's kind of crazy to me still how it works, because it's like in there so that it holds its tension firmly, and then you can still turn it easily. It's very, I still don't fully understand the science behind it, but it really works. And it seems to work better and better the more I do it. So I'm definitely getting better at it. But it is kind of more troublesome than just geared tuners, but I have actually grown to like prefer this. They're just so simple. There's just something attractive about how simple they are. And then I kind of round out the end of it, sand them all nice, and then this is Hill peg compound. I use this. I kind of rub the pegs down with it, and that lubricates it really nice so that they turn really smoothly. You can also use like beeswax for that, and a number of other things. And then there's the head with all the pegs in it. This is the only clip of the entire sanding process that I got, but trust me, I could have made this video double the length if I wanted to include all the sanding. It's a massive time sink. It's definitely the most time consuming part of the process. And then what I'm doing here is leveling the fingerboard. And the way that I've been doing it is I take my joiner plane, because I know it's a dead flat surface, and I put a piece of like 100 or 80 grit sandpaper on it and just run it and run it and run it and keep checking. And I don't show it here, but you check with a ruler. You lay a ruler or a straight edge on the top of it and make sure you can't see any light coming through. But yeah, real luthier shops will have like a big granite or stone slab that they know is like true level, and they'll put like an abrasive on that and rub it on that. But this works very well for me so far. Now I'm getting the gourd ready, cleaning up the fiberglass, filing it down and everything. For the sound hole, I'm just taking a hole saw and drilling through there. Putting the sound hole up there in sort of the top chamber has definitely a pretty significant effect on the tone. I think it creates like a more focused, sort of direct tone. Yeah, I'm not describing it super well, but you'll hear it has an interesting effect on the tone, and I'm glad I went with that just top chamber sound hole. Then I just sand it up, and I'm putting shellac on it. I usually put like quite a few coats of shellac, like 5, 6, or 7 coats, sanding lightly in between. And yeah, here's some more sanding that I forgot about actually. I'm spraying it with water to raise up the grain, and then I'm sanding it down some more. I'm using my same little plug cutter to cut an ebony plug, and kicking up a lot of smoke, as you can see. This is going to be for the 5th string nut. I've heard it called like a pip before. I don't really know what the proper name for it is. But yeah, that's just going to go right here where the neck kind of widens out again, right under the 5th string tuning peg. Dropping a little CA glue in there to hold it. And then I just kind of put some tape down, protect the fingerboard, sand it all down. Put the slot for the string in there, and that's good to go. And that brings us to the finishing process. I'll get it sanded pretty fine. I mean, sometimes I'll go up to 1,000 or 1,200 grit usually, and then I use this. I've been using the same quart jug of teak oil since I started building these. I've used it on every one, and I'm finally running out. It's probably got one more neck worth of oil left, but I really like this teak oil. It's made for denser woods than like maple and padauk, but I really like the texture that it gives, and I just really try to buff it in there as best as I can. I just rub it pretty aggressively, and I do several coats, like 3, 4, maybe even 5. Now I'm making the nut. I pretty much always use ebony for the nuts, just because it's so hard. But I've used other stuff. I've used walnut. I've used bone. And the nut installation is pretty much the same as fitting the neck to the gourd. It's just like file, test, and then eventually it'll slide right in there. And then when that happens, I measure and cut out the nut slots, and it's good to go. A pretty major step is always attaching the skin to the gourd. What I do is beforehand I measure out where all the tacks are going to go, and here I'm drilling a little tiny hole. I'm not going all the way through. I'm just drilling a little tiny divot so I know where to hammer in each tack. That's a trick I got off of Jason Romero. He posted that on Instagram. He's kind of the master at this, and he's really generous with posting tips and tricks and stuff on Instagram. But yeah, that's where I got that method from, and it's really good because it makes sure all your tacks are going to be properly lined up. And then this is a little different than usual because I have two heads. So I have to cut this skin in half and then make sure I have enough to cover the top and the bottom. And then I soak it in some warm water. Sometimes I put some coffee in to dye it, but I didn't think the dye would look good with this. 15 minutes is about right. I take it out after about 15. You can leave it in longer, but it can get too waterlogged, and then it doesn't stretch quite right, I've noticed. I even left it in overnight once, and I ended up redoing the head because it took on too much water and it didn't stretch properly. I'm using cut tacks for this. Usually I use just like upholstery tacks, and the thing I didn't consider with the cut tacks is they're much thicker. The stem of them that goes into the gourd is much, much thicker than an upholstery tack. So I had a pretty tough time hammering all these in. It took me longer than usual, and then it's not in the video, but I'm using hide glue on the rim. I spread the hide glue all around the rim of the gourd, and then that will dry, and it really holds it in place, and it keeps it at tension. It really helps a lot. But yeah, I mean, I was having a real hell of a time getting all these tacks in. I was sweating like crazy. They were slipping out of my hand. I was dropping them. My hands were covered in glue. I couldn't hold anything. This was definitely one of the... I went into this pretty cocky, feeling like, whatever, because I usually get the skins on without much issue, but this really was tough. But I finally got it on. And I use a little piece of manila folder and to protect the gourd, and then just take a razor and trim that all up and get it all even. And then here's the gourd with the top and bottom heads on it. And if you were wincing at me whacking the gourd with that hammer, you were right. I usually use a rubber mallet, but I couldn't find it. And I cracked the gourd, so luckily it was not very bad. I glued it up. Yeah, and once that glue sets up and dries, I'm not worried at all about that coming apart again. It's more just a cosmetic thing, so kind of sand it flush, put the shellac back on, and you can see there's still a slight crack visible, but it doesn't look too bad. So yeah, now this banjo's just about done. All I got left really is to make the tailpiece. This tailpiece design I also stole from Jason Romero, but I mean he didn't invent it, but I also took from him the way that the neck is mounted to the gourd. Also, now's a good time for some acknowledgments too. I've stolen a lot from Has Frets. That's his Instagram page at least. Yeah, I was looking at his page, and that was the big inspiration for this, because the way that he did the back panel on the bottle gourd, I copied from him, and he also does a lot of that Romero style stuff too. And then yeah, I'm just drilling the holes for the strings, and I'm drilling the holes in the tuning pegs. And then I strung this up without finishing the tailpiece or tuning pegs, just because I wanted to see if there were any major issues. So yeah, here's the first string going on it. And here's me trying to play it for the first time, and if you notice, there's a pretty big issue. You can hear on the fourth string, there's some pretty bad buzzing, and the cause of that buzzing, you can see here, is it's a very common problem. I've run into it before. That fifth string nut is too close, and when you when you pluck the fourth string and it vibrates, it hits and rattles against that thing. So what I did is I just started hacking away at it, um, kind of kind of without much rhyme or reason. I just started hacking at it, which was a little ballsy, but it worked. And there it is. It's working great now. It's sounding great, and there's no longer any buzz. I also went back and retouched a lot of spots on the neck that I thought I could have finished a lot better. So I went back and just filed that down, refinished it, and got the neck looking way more up to par. This bridge that I'm making, it didn't end up being the final bridge. I ended up making another taller bridge after this because I was still getting a little buzz. With these fretless banjos, I've found that if the action is too low, like you can only go so low with the action before the fourth and then sometimes the third string, because they're thicker, they just don't have enough room to clear the fingerboard, so you're just gonna get buzzing no matter what you do. At least that's what I've found. So I made a taller bridge. And that was it. The banjo was completely finished. And here's me up on my balcony playing it, and I tried to get some beauty shots of it. Don't make fun of my tomatoes. It's my first time growing them. They're ripening really small. I don't know why. If anyone's got any tips. And then I was talking away, talking about the banjo, bragging about how nice it was. And then right here, I'm going to give it a nice freeze frame. That's the moment that I spot it. And I'll cut to a close-up of it here. So yeah, once I got it under tension with the bridge pushing down on here, it cracked the gourd. That's never happened to me before. The gourd is cracked. It's compromised. So I'm kind of back to the drawing board on this one. Stay tuned. I think I gotta go to work tomorrow, but next weekend, that's gonna be the project. So keep an eye out. I think my best bet is gonna be to completely remove the head, the lower head here, fiberglass the entire inside of it, and then reinstall like a new head. That's kind of my only hope to save it, and it's going to be very, very hard to remove the head because of the hide glue that I used. Also, I think a contributing factor to why it cracked is using these really thick cut tacks. Those were just pretty traumatic and how close together they are. I think that really did weaken it, but overall, it's just a thin gourd. Yep. Bummer.